Let's jump right in. What if your data already contains the cure, the trade, the answer, but you can't ask for it because you don't know the question yet? That's the reality for most teams connecting terabytes of disparate data across cancer research and algorithmic trading platforms. There are keys to this castle, though, and I'll be talking about that using FastAPI, Pydantic, and Neo4j. Sweet. Okay, while you guys read the disclaimer, my name is Sushant. I've worked in telecom, digital video broadcasting, investment banking, life sciences, and nonprofits. And actually, the nonprofit work is the most fun. I've worked in consulting and FTE roles from associate engineer to SVP, but I've always stayed hands-on, so you'll always find me coding. One of my reviews was, you need to get off the computer and close Eclipse. That was when I was doing Java. I'm doing Python now. And you can check my LinkedIn. You can Google for my name. Don't Google Sushant Singh, though, otherwise you get a much more handsome version of me. Google Sushant Singh and Neo4j, and you'll see my LinkedIn. All right, will this still work? Sweet. So in today's world, our users span this spectrum from what I like to call, I want to download and print a PDF, to I am using my Jupyter notebook to build machine learning models. And when you hear scientists say that, your heart just drops, right? There's a heavy emphasis, or there needs to be a heavy emphasis on building models or domain modeling, and this is the key. I'm kind of dating myself by putting quotes from Eric Evans on the board, but that has been the second most pivotal book of my life. But the best way I can sum this up is that we had a senior data architect at one of the organizations I was working at. And he was like, hey, I'm working on creating all of the business models and domain models, and I want to set up time with you guys in IT who are working with the business, and I want to review some of these models with you. And so he comes in, he shows us the conceptual data model. And I was like, conceptual data model? Okay, continue. And we found out that he had dived deep into this data swamp, and for a year in isolation, built this conceptual data model across all the businesses that made no sense. It helped 0 people, it spent a lot of money, and the swamp was still a swamp. Oh, sweet, okay. Sorry, I'm still getting used to all of this new stuff, but capture. So the way I've broken this up is into 3 phases, right? We're going to talk about capture, which kind of overlaps with contextualization, and eventually we'll get to collaboration, or what I call it on the slide. Capture is a very integral part. You need to build something that is scalable, as all of you who have built enterprise applications know. You can not only handle you can handle not only structured data, like these are your internal databases, your feed files, and I'm always going to talk to you as like a high-performance data engineer because that's what I've been doing from C to C++ to anything. But also in this new world, there's like external data graphs, right? These are highly structured bits of information that you can build factory patterns on for versioning. You can do a ton of cool stuff with. But I always got the question, what about my handwritten notes? What about unstructured data, like PDFs that I'm getting from a vendor? And a lot of that is a bit of like negotiation, but your system needs to be able to handle it, right? You never want to be in that situation where you're selling a product or trying to build something internally to help the world, and they're like, well, you can't come here because we have everything in PDFs. And so here's where the heavy lifting is done to get to your data curation. Nope, that's not working anymore. Still not working. Okay. So your capture implementation would be very specific to your use cases, right? Like a lot of people are building in Jupyter notebooks, so maybe some of this doesn't apply. But it needs to solve your use cases, right? So whatever I propose or talk about building or have built, you got to take it with a grain of salt, and you got to really like mold your clay the way that you want to mold it and build your system. And so you have some people that are using knowledge graphs, in particular Neo4j, that are just firing it up to connect their disparate data sources and then pulling out their machine learning inputs and shutting down Neo4j. But the use case that I like to implement at all of these places, and at home even, is this concept of the ultra use case, which build all of your models together, right? So everything is connected to everything. And you can kind of query around, you can handle scalability as you need to, and some of the technology solutions that I've chosen are to use, of course, Apache Airflow everybody uses. And I'll do a little plug for Astronomer, because it's just, if you're doing scalable enterprise solutions, using that will just solve a lot of your problems up front. But you also need a messaging system, right? You cannot stick to HTTP with big data. You have to pull out a lot of tricks. You could use Kafka for that, and some places have used that. DBT is another one I'll talk about, but I would say, like, you know, push it off to the end. Because if you have a non-technical person working with DBT, what you'll find is that you'll create more spaghetti code and more spaghetti graphs than actually usable collection and curation information. And then the few that I Googled after this were Prefect and Dagster. And when you're trying to sell something, Prefect being perfect is kind of a good, catchy tune. So just keep that in mind. Here's the biggest point I'll tell you about this, though, the biggest problem I ran into, is that you want to keep in mind that contextualizing data is your primary goal, but specifically, ingest the data you need, not the data you want. Remember that scalability is your friend, and you may not want to reinvent the data lake. It's very tempting. It's very tempting, especially when you're delivering a solution that nobody has seen before and really impresses your users, right? Your goal is to build the fishing rod for a fisherman and not the lake itself. Okay, so let's get into, okay, let's get into event storming. So like I said before, keep in mind that contextualizing your data is your primary goal. Without this, nothing will work right, and you'll spend most of your time unraveling spaghetti code, or worse, spaghetti systems. Yeah, it's helpful to have all of your developers take a course on microservices, but that's a talk for a different day. The one thing that I've known from recruiting, I've been recruiting since I was a kid in Silicon Valley, and people would just tell me to go into interviews that they knew they weren't going to hire the candidate anyway, and just to ask him questions and get to know him or her. But the core of this is passion, right? You want somebody in front of that Vim terminal, and now I'm dating myself even more, the Vim plugin on your PyCharm that is really passionate about curing orphan diseases, really passionate about cancer. And, you know, the one thing I realize is that all of us have dealt with somebody close to us that has been going through cancer. And an inevitability in our lives is to develop cancer, right? Like, it's something that we live longer now and we develop. But you also want somebody who is, like, interested in what EMA strategy is best for Ethereum. And so tell your developers at this point, to get to contextualization, that you got to be passionate about learning, and it'll never steer you wrong. All right, so this is a lot of fun and is really interesting. But event storming is the act of putting stickies on a whiteboard wall or glass you can find. The more physical area you can cover, the more fun you'll have. I remember being in a conference room at a very high floor, and we had stickies all around the 3 walls that had no projection screen. And these stickies, you got to keep in mind solid principles and old school patterns, right? They'll be your friend. They'll be what the models are that somebody will pip install so that he can build a small molecule, route scouting, machine learning, anything on top of that data that he's pulling directly from your system. Now, there's intricacies that I probably can't talk about because of reasons, but you can eventually get to that point as long as your model is pure, is strong, and consistent. Okay, so the first time I did so this event storming, right? Let's talk about that for a little bit. And the first time I did it at one organization. Some others you can't do. You want it to be in person. You want it to be very personal. And I got up, explained what the different colors Post-its did, and nobody got up to do anything. And finally, I got up and I said, okay, Stephen, he's still a friend of mine, but Stephen, so what are we going to do here? What's the first thing that happens? Oh, well, it comes from the clinic like this. So I was like, really? So it's like this. And I wrote it up, stuck it on the board, right? But then I started making mistakes. So immediately he comes up and he just grabs it. And he's passionate about this too, just as I am from an IT perspective. And so he starts going through creating all of the Post-its on the wall, on the whiteboard, around the walls, and it goes everywhere, right? And it was a great day. By the end, people were trying to steal each other's Post-it notepads, and that's when I discovered you need to buy more than 3 Post-it pads. But the most important data architectural lesson, and with event storming that I will tell you, is never mistake the permanent marker with the dry erase marker. That's how you get kicked out of the building. It's a tough crowd. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble going back and forth from this, and my clicker stopped working, so just bear with me. All right, so here's the power or the culmination of your work, right? We've talked about this collection, curation, and then we come to, I used to call it collaboration, but it's now communicate or communication, right? So powered by the asynchronous performance of FastAPI and the strict schema validation of Pydantic, right? You have these pure models. Your knowledge graph drives cross-functional collaboration. You don't want to stop with just, what use case can I use? Clinical trials or something like that, right? I've never worked in that area, so it's okay. So clinical trials, you want to start with them, but you want to follow it all the way back to maybe even discovery or development or formulation, right? Just looking at, one of the biggest, funniest things was like your ubiquitous language, right? As a software developer, if I say API, what does that mean? Anybody? API? Exactly, right? It's not actually that, it's an active pharmaceutical ingredient. And so whether you have a C-level executive or a lab chemist at an HPLC, the system consistently delivers low latency, highly reliable data. And that's what it means by highly reliable, right? Like if he goes in there and he's like, oh, I want to click on this API class. Well, it shouldn't bring up URLs and FQDNs and ports and stuff like that, right? And just the whole location of where he's going to get his data. It should bring up the active pharmaceutical ingredient, maybe linked to formulation, maybe linked to indication. It should have real relevance around his world or her world or their world and not ours. And it's really like what I found was that knowledge graph, that semantic property graph, which I kind of mentioned earlier, and the specific ones to use that are like the best. That's providing that consistency, right? When you have the centralized point, you can have a centralized data model being returned to all of your users, and you won't have this inconsistency of data, right? Like I go back to this techie user, this person who's building machine learning models on his desktop, right? He's building custom curated models on his desktop that nobody has access to. Nobody knows if it's right or wrong. There's no regulation you can really put around that. He's not in IT, right? And even if he was in IT, he's not deploying to a cloud service that's auditable and controllable. So that knowledge graph becomes very key. And then you go to this conversational interface, right? This is just some amazing technology out there with just translating, like vibe coding, right? Like we all do a little bit of vibe coding. Like I have never written a UI. I will never look at JavaScript in my entire life, but I build UIs now. And so this conversational interface to your actual scientific data, right? Like it knows to build a bar chart. It knows to look at this aspect or that aspect or large molecule, small molecule, cell therapy, right? And just by using English, it's kind of, and I'll talk about that more at the end because everybody loves AI and, you know, AI is going to be the cherry on top. But this conversational interface is what gives you like real true power and context combined. And I'll get into the details. It's very interesting, actually. But if you actually look at Neo-Dash in particular, it's like open source. I think Neo4j bought it or something like that. But if you look at it, you flip over or create these widgets. Inside, you'll actually see a cipher and a switch to go to natural language processing. But all of this is powered by your non-relational database, your natural language query database, your cipher, right? Like this is English. Like when you do the Neo4j certified professional, like day one kind of videos, you'll see that they want you to look at data as though you are talking about it and not that you have to do joins and inner and outer and underneath. And zero training, that was the best part. I mean, like we were definitely, I think I've always been understaffed, but like, to be able to push something to production and then have your users train other users on it, like a conversational piece while you're having coffee. Oh, if you want that data, then you should just go to this URL and I'll ping it to you when I get back to my desk. Like, that's the best, right? Like, we eventually had to, and if you get advanced, you can't really stay with Tableau or Neo-Dash or some of these dashboarding platforms, and I would say never to use Tableau, but story time. So a user comes up to me. There's one of the same people in this group, and I was talking to another user who ended up being a close friend of mine, but he comes up to me, he's like, Sushant, I need you to generate PowerPoints from your dashboard. And I'm like, okay, yeah, college grad 101, I can do that. He's like, but why don't we sit down and why don't we talk about what you want to actually create? And we sit down, he started, it's like, okay, take this and take the comments that I put in here and then also put them in his text boxes. And we go on like that for a few minutes. And then he's just like, wait, can I just send this link to the people, like the scientists that I'm working with? I was like, yeah, absolutely. We have RBAC, everything's controlled, everything's protected, and it's controlled at the most important point, right? And so he sends it over to them. Later I find out that they used to have like weeks and weeks of preparing PowerPoints, going together when everybody was available, going over the PowerPoints, and then something would come up, another question would come up, and so now they're just collaborating in this online system that, again, required zero training, right? Like, when was the last time you used a system and you had to look for where to put comments that wasn't Microsoft? Like, it was a really intuitive way to just communicate and collaborate, and they were saving tons of time, and that's eventually what the output of this whole thing was. All right, let's go to the reason you guys are probably here. Okay. So I'm in this event storming workshop, and we had just met with Google, who was helping us with GCP, and AWS was also like in some of these conversations, as it is at every company, and now nonprofits. But we're in there, and I used to dedicate these whole day-long event storming workshops, which I was lucky enough to get the senior scientists to pay for. And so we had food, and it was a great thing, and breakfast, lunch, and sometimes dinner. And we got together, but it would take 6 hours, right? Like, this is old school, like, business process mapping or modeling, and it would take a while to put all these stickies on the board. There's a lot of stickies. And at this point, I was well-funded, so I could afford, like, 20 packs of stickies. And so I had just put together something like the night before with another developer. And it was with conjunction with a bunch of other different, let's say, vendors. And, but all of the code was our own. They just taught us how to do this. And basically what it came down to was make one call to OpenAPI, sorry, you can tell what I'm working on. But make one call to your AI, your AI key, and take the question that the user puts in and ask your AI, how do I get the data out of my contextual database, right? And in this case, it's Cypher. How do I cipher out? So now I can cipher out, make a second call. It's very expensive if you think about it. Make a second, especially with the prices of Anthropic going up. But make a second call to your AI with my context, not just data, my context and my data, and my question. And here's what happens. The answers you get back are extremely reliable, right? And they're just, it got to the point where I launched this after my cool deck, right? Like the fancy deck that you put together for all your users that goes through marketing and all these other things and Gamma. And they just started going up, and they started asking these questions. I don't really remember the questions, but I realized what they were doing. They were regression testing the system. So they started asking questions they already knew the answers to. What we had done is we had preloaded the data from the data sources into a model that we thought would fit, and that was what was sitting in the knowledge graph. So the knowledge graph has their production data in it, and it's available, and we just POC'd a life cycles at some companies just doesn't mean anything, but we had POC'd this back and forth communication of asking questions and doing this. And for us, it made sense, right? Like we would ask it like, how many nodes are in the database? And it would return the complete set of nodes. But for them, they were asking really deep questions about animal studies and other things. And you can do the same thing with your algorithmic trading platform. Some people I know do that, and they bring in their data into Neo4j, and they're now able to do this double AI call and get real chatbot information. Eventually it goes agentic, but that's a different conversation for a different time. And I have to hurry up. So what happened is they start regression testing the system, and then they start asking it new questions, and all I'm hearing is like, oh yeah, that could work. Maybe we could structure this study or that study like this. And it was just really cool. It burned through about over an hour of time, and we went late that day, but it was really cool to see like a piece of software pop up and then users just be like, I don't want to do anything else. I want to play with this chatbot. And you got to remember, these people are doing some amazing things, right? Like there are kids around because of their research. There are like presidents, well, not presidents, but you know what I mean, right? There are like government officials. There are firefighters around because these scientists are really passionate about their work, and now they have tools to actually deliver on the passion that they have, right? And so, of course, if they see something they like, they're going to be on it, right? Because they're doing what could be called some of the best work in this world. And so that was just an experimental AI chatbot with production data sets. And so imagine when you take these methodologies and these technologies and you put it on the working, scalable production cloud. All right. So the last thing I'll leave you with is this AI-generated image, but it kind of shows that, like, we live in this unstructured world, and I had a gig, a consulting gig a long time ago, and I was like, some of these things that people are producing are just parlor tricks, right? Like AI, they're using AI, they're trying to win a big point with their boss, and they're creating parlor tricks. But if you don't work on data curation and collection, there's no hope, right? An application that relies on an unstructured model will eventually collapse under its own weight. Garbage in, garbage out. And this is the pipeline summary. So you guys can take that. And again, you're going to use newer technologies. Your software development team should continue to evolve and should continue to adapt to what's new, right? Like I don't know if Dagster's new, but all of these technologies coming in, you should continue to adapt and get more performance, get better and better, right? Like back in the day, I would build C++ SIP proxies. right? Like, could you imagine me having to build that now? It's just a point. To create a good model, you must have a deep understanding of the domain. So I think we have time for questions, if anybody has any questions. This is just a little bit about me and my life, and that is James Clear. None of this is AI generated.